Right, so today we're going to cover a simple mastering session in Logic that shouldn't take long. Very simple rough to send the preliminary masters out into studios or further mastering engineers if you want to set it to -0.3, or if you wanted it to send it out to a CD pressing company or vinyl company as well. So let's go ahead and open up the session and pull up. I'm pulling up a track that is nearly in its completion stage. The mix is more or less done. I'm just going to do a few touches on the mix, and then we'll go through a mastering signal chain, which is what this video is all about. And I'll show you what I like to do in mastering within the box, that is on a computer, and no outboard gear available. So okay, so we have our tune here, it's going off, and we can pull up our mix window, and as you can see here we have our master output already set, and it's hitting at around, for the intro, around -7 dB. Now what you want to do is actually have the RMS value of your output at around negative, I'd say be safe, -12, anywhere from -9 to 12, with the peaks coming around -6, so as to provide a little bit of headroom for limitation, as compression limitation, as well as some sort of EQing as well, EQing scheme for your output chain. Now the output gets set to the stereo master, and when you render a file, when you bounce it out as a file, everything that's applied to the master output gets sent to the master stereo bus, and is essentially recorded. So let's go ahead and get started. And what I like to do is pull up a part of the song itself that is pretty heavy. So we'll start at 33, which is where the song drops here, and go ahead and loop that section and play it out. So you can see here that the master output is hitting at around -6, which is pretty good for peaks. It might jump a little bit higher than that, so right now we have enough headroom. The goal is to get at least 6 dB of headroom on the average rating, which is pretty good here. But like a little bit of space could actually help us out. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down the mix just a tad. Now the goal is to just get it around -6, so maybe a little bit more. Alright, fantastic. We're hitting right around there, and yeah, now let's go ahead and start with our mastering chain. What I like to do first is scoop out with a shelve quite a bit of the lows, but not as much as you would think. For mastering, -2 dB on a scale, like right here, this -2 is quite a bit of dB that you're subtracting. So this is subtraction, this is addition on an EQ. So what you want to do is subtract maybe -0.2 here, below, I'd say around 30 or 40 hertz, which is not really musical in terms of musicality. So let's go ahead and listen to that. The cool thing about Logic is that you can have a frequency analyzer. So this little analyzer thing here in your EQ will go ahead and project your frequencies in a line here. I also like to toss on the master output kind of a frequency analyzer, and my favorite is actually the PAZ frequency analyzer in the Waves pack. So this is actually a more representative as opposed to the Logic one. This one's actually my favorite frequency analyzer, but I like to use the Logic's EQ. So let's go ahead and continue. Now, right around, I'd also dip out a little bit of the highs. It all depends on your mix, but just a little bit of the highs. Threshold of pain is around 18K, so I like to go around 18.5K and dip maybe 2 decibels out of there, just for those extra highs. And if you find any muddiness in your mix, it's usually, what I like to do is create kind of a bell and find out where the muddiness lies. There's a lot of muddiness right there. Right around there too. So just very, very slight minute changes. That really hits it for me. Okay, so that's enough for the EQ. Yeah. So that's pretty good. Our headroom is right, the peaks hit right below -6 here, so that's 6 dB of headroom above peak range, which is excellent. Okay, now let's go ahead and pull up. What I have to do next is usually is a type of compression or limitation. What really helps is multiband compression, which in this case might help. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up Logic's multiband compressor, the multipressor. Okay, beautiful. Now what's good about this is that you can go ahead and solo each band. So here are 4 bands. You can solo each band just to hear a particular frequency range. So this is right now 500 to 5 kilohertz of the range. And here's your ultra highs, so 5K to 20,000 hertz. And then yeah, 100 to 500. And I like to start with the low end first because that's usually a very beefy area. So right, so what this is doing is going ahead and compressing as well as expanding above and below a threshold set here, a decibel threshold, for the 20 hertz to the 100 hertz range, which is all low end. So I'm going to go ahead and start compressing this just a bit. So what you want to do first is lower extremely the compression threshold and bring it back up, and you can start to hear changes. Now what a compressor essentially does is above or below a threshold, so right now it's at -17 decibels. If there's any signal that's above it, it will be compressed by a 3-to-1 ratio of compression. So every decibel that goes over, or every 3 decibels that goes over, will be squashed down to 1 decibel accordingly. And then done so with an attack and release and peak and RMS value here. So let's go ahead and start altering that until we find a good sound. Yeah. So usually I like to have a decent attack and decent release for mastering. Let's see how much this does. That's pretty good right there. Now see, your lows are actually getting lower, but they're being compressed, so they're very upfront in the mix. I like to do that for electronic music production. Is go ahead and compress pretty heavily, so as to expand it later using a limiter. And what the limiter does is it goes ahead and it'll expand all your lows back to its original position with a lot of control, which is what you need. Now let's move on. Yeah, this is sounding pretty good as is. It's getting a little bit of the hi-hat, it sounds like, as well as the mid-range ambient hits, and a bit of the kick as well in this range, the 100 to 500 range. So let's go ahead and start altering this quite a bit, radically. Okay, so that's all our low end right there, as well as our low mids. Let's move on to the high mids. This is where more of the snare lies. Okay, so very light compression here would be good. Yeah, it seems about right. The attack. It's good. And these are the very highs. I don't think it needs very much work, so I'm pretty good with this mix. It feels very solid. Okay, so we have the multi-pressor going on. After this, I like to compress it a little bit more for roundness. And I'll go ahead and slap on my favorite roundness compressor. I'm going to go ahead and use the, I believe it was the SSL. Yeah, the SSL compressor. It's a nice onboard emulation compressor for the master bus. So what you want to do is shoot for somewhere around 3 to 5 decibels compression, using, you know, a decent attack and a decent release. Of course, feel it out until you get the right amount. So it's hitting pretty nicely. You can also compare using presets. Also are pretty nice here. Using the mastering preset here, which changes the release to auto here, and it'll go ahead and auto release it for you, which is quite nice. Yeah. So just to round off the bass a little bit more and whatever is heavy, right now we're getting a lot of, looks like the mid-range, or the low mid-range, very low range actually, 62 hertz. Yeah, everything else is pretty much tapered off. This orange line is actually showing the max peaks, and we'll hold it there. Now you can actually clear memory here, and it'll hold. So as of the last, yeah, it'll go ahead and hold it. Right, so that sounds pretty good. And right now, so what I've essentially done is reduced significantly our RMS and peak values here. Now we can go ahead and bring it up to 0 to make it loud, and bring a bit more of the lower end bass content back into the mix. So what we're going to use now is an L2. It's a limiter, and it's a simple limiter. Bring back the frequency analyzer here, and you can go ahead and bring down the threshold. And bring back the loudness into the mix, just so it's barely hitting 0 here. That's a bit much. There we go. Beautiful. I'm going to turn the output ceiling. What the output ceiling does is actually sets a clip threshold for the amount that's going to be passing on the output bus. So right now it's at -30, so hence -30 is way down here in this little range, so it's not going to go above -30. -0.3 should do. And as you can see, everything is just hitting right below 0, and the peaks aren't even getting high enough to get above that. Right. So that's pretty good. Very healthy mix. And you're ready to bounce. And that's about it. Thank you for watching, and have a good evening.